Today on UVA Legends podcast, I have Joan Herlong, incredibly successful realtor from the South Carolina market. Joan's a 81 graduate of UVA. Recently wrote a book, as is, published by Forbes, that kind of lays out her story in a very hilarious way, and kind of a roadmap for success in a real estate market. Joan, nice to meet you. Thanks for doing this.
Julian, thank you so much for having me. And
Oh,
thanks for reading it, or at least doing the Cliff's Notes version.
Well, I did. It was really good, and I would have read it. I had a really busy week this week, so if I'd have gotten more time, I would have given a good read. I just went through a real estate transaction, and we don't
Were
do
you
that.
A buyer or a seller?
I was a buyer and seller, and my first time since 2007 doing both.
Mm-hmm.
It was interesting how things had changed since the last time I've done this. But let me give a little bit about your background, and then we'll get right to that.
Sure.
You're from Illinois, and
I grew up in Winnetka, Illinois. Yes.
yeah. Is that where is that in Illinois?
Winnetka is like right on the lakefront, and it is about 30 minutes north of Chicago. It's what we call the North Shore.
Oh, wow. Okay, so you're going towards Wisconsin.
Yeah, it's about an hour south of the Wisconsin border.
Okay. And your mother was a realtor. She started.
Yes, she was.
She got into it after the kids were grown, and that was kind of her late
went
profession.
into it. She first started in what we call estate sales or tag sales, and where people would liquidate all of the contents of a home. And then she realized that the real estate agents involved were a lot more successful than she was, and so she got a real estate license when I was like a junior, senior high school. I was 17 and she was 57. And it was her first paying job since she had been married at the age of 22. And yeah, my 10 older siblings were already out of the nest, so to speak. And so it was just me and my younger sister at home. And she was immediately obsessed, which is why I knew from a very young age that I would never go into real estate. Famous last words.
No, exactly. Well, the way the story goes is, I know you were in Northern Virginia for a while after graduation with your husband, and he ended up getting stationed or transferred to Greenville, South Carolina, an area you weren't familiar with. And as you described in your book, you wanted a way to make a lot of money but have a little freedom, and it was a way for you to do it. And the most important thing is you love houses and you love people. So obviously there's going to be success in real estate.
Actually, houses are a commodity. And if you go into the business because you love houses and you love people, you're going to get over both of those things very quickly. Houses are a commodity. Housing is a commodity. And in this business, in a lot of businesses, but particularly residential real estate, if you're going into this business because you love people, you're going to be enlightened about that very quickly, because you see a side of people that you don't really want to know exists.
Yeah. Well, and then you did learn to love the people that you choose to work with, and you train to be successful.
So I love the people that work for this company, and I feel very fortunate in that regard. But I think the biggest mistake that people can make when they're talking about going into real estate is to say, oh, I just love houses and I just love people. You don't go to a financial advisor because they just love money and they just love people. Yeah. You rely on them because they've got some expertise, they're level-headed, and they can help you make a fully informed decision. And the most successful realtors that I know of follow that same path. They treat it like the business that it is.
Yeah, it's so true. As I was saying before, I think this is the fourth house that we've bought, and I'm 57, so we don't do this very often. And I mean, right. I'm sure you have clients to do it more often, but generally this is not something that comes every day. And so the last time I went through this, the stager that was just starting out, a person that was a stager. Usually, staging, your realtor would tell you, "Hey, take those pictures off the wall of your family." It was but a stagers is something we do now. Zillow now exists where that everyone thinks they know exactly how much their home is worth.
Right.
Realtors are social media stars now. I mean, they have these awesomely produced videos, and there's a lot going on. And I think without that advice, a seller and a buyer would be lost because things had changed so much as I couldn't believe how radically the industry had changed in those 15 years.
Who, so when you sold your house and the home was staged, who paid for that?
Um, I never saw an invoice for that. So I believe it was in the end. I
It
believe
was
the
part of the
realtor paid for
package.
that. Yes.
That's great.
I did wonder about that. So,
Well, I mean, that's something that you should never have to wonder about, who pays for what. And
yeah. Mhm.
a lot of the time now, staging is what we call virtual. It's computer generated imagery, and it is a dead ringer for the real thing, which is a real it's a real boon to vacant properties that could otherwise be vulnerable to scammers who put up a vacant property for rent for a ridiculously low amount and have people send them a deposit, and they don't even own the house. But yeah, most well done virtual staging is such a dead ringer that people don't realize that the house is actually vacant.
It seems a little unethical though, doesn't it? I mean, you're drawing pictures of no?
I don't know that it's unethical because
Yeah.
you're showing the house in its best light. You're
Mhm.
also giving a sense of scale. It's no more unethical than showing a house that's furnished and the furnishings don't stay.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. Good point. Well, Joan, these changes that I talked about in the industry,
Mhm.
do you see these as mostly positive? I mean, as being
Yes.
a realtor now, is it more enjoyable than it was 15 years ago?
It's more enjoyable for me now than it was 15 years ago because I'm running my own company and I get to handpick all the people who work with me and for me. So yeah, I've got a greater sense of autonomy. I also think I enjoy it better because the rules are becoming more clear to the public. The ironic thing is that the number one goal of the National Association of Realtors Code of Ethics, the first thing is to protect the public. And the best way to protect the public is to be completely transparent. But one of my company's policies is complete client transparency. We blind copy our clients on everything. And that is, for some reason, a radical concept at other companies.
Mm,
It's like, I can't be bothered to let my client be that involved. But
mm,
if you're going to do what you say you're going to do, when you say that you're going to do it, you shouldn't have to worry about that promise to keep your client in the loop at all times. And the way I developed that policy was by virtue of being, for years and years, I was not somebody's first choice as a listing agent. I was their second or third choice because it didn't work out. They were disappointed, whatever. And the number one recurrent complaint among sellers who had been disappointed by whatever relationship they had with a previous listing broker was, I was left in the dark. I signed papers with him and I had no idea what was going on. They didn't even know what the concept of feedback was. They just felt like they were sort of shunted aside and often made to feel like they were bothering their agent, who was supposed to be their advocate, if they were asking for updates or whatever. So it seems like such a simple thing. And when you think about it, in this electronic age, if I'm representing you and I send an email on your behalf and I don't blind copy you or I don't forward a copy to you, then I'm making an affirmative decision to keep you out. Why would I do that if I'm representing you? So it seems like a radical concept, but it's not if what you're trying to be is really transparent and open with your client.
Well, speaking of transparent and open, I know that's your title as is
Yes.
both sides should bring transparency to a transaction. I'm sure it's more than that, but that's kind of the start of it. Is there anything that you don't want to know? I mean, the client, are there certain things about the house that might make them challenging, but it probably won't affect this transaction. It'll be long gone before it's recognized.
You know,
You want to know everything.
that's a really good question. And it brings up the importance of somebody having a buyer agent. Because there are things about a house or a neighborhood or a location that have nothing to do with disclosure issues or the house itself or repairs. When I was back in like 1999, 2000, I was the grand poobah of our neighborhood HOA. And most HOAs are where retired guys go to make other people miserable these days. But at that time, I guess everybody else took a step backward and I forgot to step back. So it looked like I had stepped forward. But anyway, I was the grand poobah, the president of the HOA for about a year. And I would routinely, there was a main drag into the neighborhood and it was a double yellow line. And I would routinely get angry calls from young moms who lived on that particular drag, demanding that I have speed bumps put in or that I needed to put in sidewalks, things that I was powerless to do. I said, you know, if I had any power, that's not where I'd start. But anyway, they were constantly railing about the fact that people were driving too quickly on their street and there was too much traffic and they didn't feel safe taking their baby carriage out and walking their kids. And I thought, did you buy your house in the dark? But the thing about that particular drag into that neighborhood is that if you look at a house on that street at 12:30 on a Sunday afternoon, dogs are asleep on that street. There's no traffic. Okay. But if you are there at 4:30 on a Tuesday, it is like a speedway. So, and if you are just going to the listing agent and saying, you know, I really like this house and I think I'm going to get a better deal by going to the listing agent. And sometimes that's true. Sometimes it's not. It is not a matter of disclosure to say, by the way, your dog could turn into a grease spot if they get out of the yard at 4 o'clock on a Tuesday. They don't have to disclose that. The fact that it's got a double yellow line is kind of a clue. But if you have a buyer agent on your side who knows the area, who knows the neighborhood, that buyer agent will say, you know, I'm glad that you like this home and this does look like a little sleepy street, but let's come back on a Tuesday afternoon or on a weekday after 4 o'clock. And you'll see that this is actually a very trafficked street and you might look at this home in a different light. Mm-hmm. If you don't have a buyer agent on your side who has knowledge and traction in the particular area that you're looking for, then it's not that the listing agent is being less than honest, but like I said, a double yellow line on a street kind of speaks for itself. Mm-hmm. So it is a constant thing of caveat emptor. If you don't ask the right questions, the listing agent doesn't have to volunteer that stuff. They have to volunteer everything that they know about the house in terms of its the condition of the house and the lot. But they don't have to tell you whether it's a good neighborhood, a bad neighborhood, a busy street, a sleepy street. That's not a matter of disclosure. That really should be a matter of common sense. But for newcomers, it's not. They're flying blind. So for people who are new to an area, when they say, I've got it, I'm relying on Zillow and I'm just going to bounce around and talk to listing agents, they might think they're getting a better deal, but they're not getting below the surface in terms of all the information that you might want about that home.
Yeah. Well, and how granular do you need to be about the neighborhood you represent? Like, for example, I don't know Greenville that well, but my guess is you could probably come up to speed with any neighborhood. But in Northern Virginia, we may have a neighborhood specialist that specializes in like kind of one planned community. They know everything about that community. They kind of hang out. They may even live there. Mm-hmm. I would assume in Greenville, you probably know all the neighborhoods after 30 years of doing this.
Yeah, I'm pretty well versed after 30 years, but I'm not going to play a trivia game very well if somebody says, where is, Rosebud? And it's a new subdivision 25 minutes away. I may or may not know about that. But inside the city limits, it would be hard to stump me. But that's a very good question, Julian, because when you're working with a buyer agent and you're interviewing, hopefully more than one, you want to ask them, what are your areas of expertise? Do you sell more condos or do you sell more homes? Do you sell more new construction or do you specialize in historic homes? Everybody's got their little niche. Do you work with more buyers or more sellers? Ideally, you want to work with a buyer agent who also works with sellers, because if they don't have the ability to empathize or anticipate how a seller is going to approach the transaction, it could be the blind leading the blind. And the vast majority of agents in this business mostly work just with buyers.
Yeah, but as a buyer agent, is it easy to come up to speed with a neighborhood and become an expert in the neighborhood? Or are you saying you probably need to get an expert in a particular neighborhood if you know you want to be in that neighborhood?
Well, like I said, if you're looking, if you just want to buy a condo in the metro area of anywhere that you're looking at,
Mhm.
you want to make sure that you're not dealing with somebody who sells a lot of ranches and land and equestrian properties, because that's not their bailiwick.
Right.
Ask questions,
Mhm.
because they may not necessarily volunteer that. They might be winging it because you're looking at things that with a $2 million price tag, and they think, well, for that amount of money, I'll try to get up to speed.
Mhm.
Ask questions.
Yeah.
A lot of people think that it's rude to ask questions. You don't want to get the answers too late.
Yeah. Well, let's talk a little bit about price negotiations. As I mentioned earlier, with Zillow and the internet, it's like when you go to a car dealership now, everyone has all the sticker prices. So the negotiations are a little bit different than they were 20, 30 years ago. To me, that's one of the things the agent can really help with, because like when we sold our house, it's very hard to be objective
About your own
of a
home, yeah.
price when you have all this information about the house. It means a lot to you. And the reality is that there are certain strategies that you want to try to take advantage of. Like, for example, if you know you may want to price it low and really get a bidding war started, and you can actually get a higher price. There's a lot of things that you may want to try that a person may not do if they're on their own.
Right.
So is Zillow and transparency of value change the negotiation, and how do you generally approach that aspect?
Okay, so let me answer the Zillow part of the question. Zillow is just one piece of the puzzle.
Mhm.
Zillow has a margin of error of about 20%. So there's really no substitute for um, dealing with somebody who knows your area as a seller, who knows your area and has a strong track record of listing and selling properties in your area. And it might be that you're going with a company. I'm not saying you can't work with new people. It depends upon what is their backing. For example, anybody who's new in my office is not winging it. They have a mentor, or they have me being their house whisperer, so that they're not just practicing on somebody. So Zillow, and I've got a lot of people over the years who are like, I need to get X. Yeah, I need to get is not really a basis for pricing a property. On the flip side, I've had a lot of wise guys over the years, buyers, who say, so what's this guy gotten it? What do you think he's gotten it? And my response to that is, well, if this seller inherited the property from his great uncle and he doesn't have a dime in it, does that mean he's supposed to give it to you? It has no value because he doesn't have anything in it. That's not the way that you approach value. It's about supply, demand, location, and condition. So yeah, if you inherit your great uncle's place and he had just had it renovated and he just had it repainted with all the current colors and the floors were just refinished and it's all brand new light fixtures, then you have hit the jackpot. But if you inherited your great uncle's place and it's decrepit and it looks like gray gardens, then it might just be the land value. So what somebody's got in something, again, it's one piece of the puzzle, but it's not the be all and end all. People approach pricing and also negotiation radically differently now in 2024 than they were doing in 2020 and 21. Those 2 years were an unprecedented seller's market. I'd never seen anything like it before, and I probably won't see it again in my lifetime. It was a confluence of incredibly low interest rates and low inventory. And then we had this pandemic where suddenly people were saying, well, I can work anywhere. I can work remotely. Well, maybe I'll move to Greenville, South Carolina, where we have 4 seasons, low taxes, low cost of living, 45 minutes from the mountains, 3 hours from the ocean, and great schools. Maybe that's where I'll go. And so we really benefited from that. But now the pendulum has swung back more to the center, where once again, I've got buyers who are saying, well, what do you think they've gotten it? And then I go into my sermon of, that's not what somebody paid for something. What they've got in it is one piece of the puzzle. But back during the recession, nobody cared what a seller had in it. There were many sellers bringing money to the table. So it really depends a lot about supply, demand, condition, location, and circumstances. For example, if I'm selling a house because my sellers are going through a divorce, I'm never going to disclose that. That is personal information, and I'm never going to disclose that. But as a buyer agent, if I figure out through the grapevine that the sellers are selling because of a divorce, then I know one of those two sellers are an ally to my buyers, because one of them wants to sell and one of them doesn't. You just have to figure out who they are. So those personal circumstances, they matter. Now, if somebody's going through bankruptcy, you have to disclose that. But personal situations, a lot of the most common question is, why are they selling? Well, they're selling because they want to sell their house. But when I've had sellers who say, I don't have to sell, then why are they talking to me?
Yeah.
Because that's what I do for a living. If you want to sell your home, call me.
I do feel like one of the biggest selling jobs that you have to do as a realtor, in addition to getting the clients in the first place and selling the home, is convincing your client on the price, a price where it's going to move, and also get them to invest appropriately in what needs to be done. I mean, I had never heard of declutters until 6 months ago. Now I know everything about how to declutter. It was, I spent a lot of money on, moving all these things I didn't even know really existed. It seems to me that is a really, really challenging part of your job, is convincing your clients how to maximize their transaction.
Right. Well, the first thing I do when I walk through with a seller is I look at it with what I call a buyer's eye, because there are things that they want to do, that they want to consider to help their home show its best, such as decluttering. But I don't tell them to take down their family pictures. I might advise them to take down their nudes, because you don't want to be the nudie house. But most of the time, sellers are very surprised at the things that I don't expect them to do. I don't expect them to necessarily repaint everything. I don't want their pantry to be reorganized according to the Dewey Decimal System. If they're OCD and that makes them happy, that's fine. But if they're not that way, it's going to be a source of stress if I tell them I expect that from them. So it's all about making sure that you have presented the home in a way so that people are focusing on what I call the donut instead of the whole. Nothing that's cluttering or distracting their vision. Sorry. Sorry about that.
No, not at all.
Mhm.
So, but you do agree that that's one of the most important roles of a realtor, is making the right investments and actually kind of evaluating what this client can afford to do and what they probably can't afford to do. And isn't that kind of an important role?
Yeah, it's useless if you go in and say, you need to do this and this and this and this. And they say, look, we both just lost our jobs and I don't have that kind of money. We just need to get out from under this home. You've got to do a lot of listening. Why someone wants to sell plays a role in what they are able and willing to do in terms of prepping the house. Everybody's got sweat equity, but a lot of the times what I'll do is somebody will think about doing a renovation, and they're not thinking about selling now, but they're thinking about selling sometime in the next 5 to 10 years. And I love being able to kibitz and say, yeah, these things are smart things to spend money on, but these other things, that's just for your personal enjoyment. But for example, if what would I advise against? Oh, if somebody was adding a second floor to their home and they wanted to save some money and they put in a circular staircase instead of a staircase, they're throwing good money after bad. They're not improving their home, because a circular staircase is a hazard to a lot of people, to older people or people with very young children. So yeah, you can put in this really snazzy circular staircase, but if it turns off more buyers than it turns on, then you've just wasted a lot of money and time.
Yeah. Well, how important it to the client, but also the realtor, is your broker. I think that's what it's called. Sotheby's in your case, they have a big presence in my area. I'm in Northern Virginia. How important is that? I mean, is a great realtor, a talented realtor in any under any broker, or is that really important to the realtor and also to the transaction?
I would say yes. There are three brands. There are three brands on the business card that everybody in my company carries in their pocket. One is Sotheby's International Realty. It is absolutely unrivaled and unparalleled in terms of the luxury market. But I don't want that to ever turn off somebody. Like, I would say the lowest price listing that I have right now is about $250,000. It's an investment property that one of my sellers has, but he has a lot of investment properties. Do you think I'm going to turn that down because one property is $250,000? No, I'm never going to do that, because the transaction is really all about the relationship that I have with that client and the long-term relationship that I have with them, that they have bought and sold many properties, some lower than that, some higher than that, but it's all about their portfolio. So Sotheby's International Realty has the greatest reach and impact among wealthy, discerning buyers, not just in the US, but around the world. A lot of these other companies that say that they're a member of this or that neighbor network, or that they're global this or global that, they're really just trying to be like Sotheby's. And I don't have to be like anything. We're part of it. When they first came calling almost 8 years ago, I thought, I ain't broke. I don't need fixing. And they kept their promises. They said the Sotheby's International Realty brand opens doors that were previously invisible to me. They're like, Sotheby's in Northern Virginia. So moving to Greenville, South Carolina, you already have a sense of what the level of service is, regardless of where you see the sign. And then the second brand on their card is Joan Herlong and Associates. I've been doing this for over 30 years. I've developed a reputation in this area as being the top producer, but I also, I'm pretty exacting. I have high standards for myself. I have high standards for the way we represent our clients. And the third and equally important brand on that business card is the realtor themselves.
Right. And
I like to tell my agents it's three important brands on one card. So yeah, Sotheby's International Realty, it makes a huge difference. Let me get my my arm sore from patting myself on the back, but there's a guy that I've been trying to woo to have him join our company. And he paid us a very high compliment. He said, I will say, he's working for another company and he'll see the light soon. But he said, I will say this, when I'm representing a buyer or a seller and the other agent in a transaction is agent, John Doe from any other company in the upstate, he goes, I always wonder what I'm going to get. It's like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're going to get. And he said, but when it's your company, when it's Sotheby's International Realty on the other side of the transaction, he said, I can relax a little bit because I know that that other agent knows what they're doing. They represent their client's interest with passion, but also restraint. Nothing gets personal. And they know the contract backward and forward. And he said, that's not true of most of our competitors. So I felt that made me purr a good bit.
Yeah.
We're doing something right.
No, you're doing a lot right. I've seen your numbers. Now, what about clients? Assuming you have good people, would you rather have a client that's been out of the market for 15 years, doesn't even know what's really going on? Or do you prefer someone who's is frequently in the market, they're a real estate investor? But assuming they're both good people, which is more fun to work with?
Oh, that's a really good question, Julian, because there's all kinds of fun. If it's a frequent, if it's a frequent flyer,
right,
then you're on a different level, but it's still a constant educational process because you're sussing out things for them, things that may not even be for sale, and you're constantly exchanging information. When it's somebody who hasn't been in the market for 15 years, for example, it is, as you said, you hadn't listed or bought for what, 7 years, 8 years?
I listed something, a rental property 10 years ago, but I haven't bought and sold since 2007.
Right. Okay. So that was a good long time. And so much changes. so much changes. It is a constant educational process. And I will tell you, as a buyer or seller, if the agent that you're interviewing with or considering treats any of your questions as dumb or tiresome, or they roll their eyes, that is not the agent for you. This is an educational process. And my job is to make sure that my seller or my buyer client make a fully informed decision. And if I give any of their questions short shrift, how can they be fully informed?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you come with impeccable credentials being a UVA graduate. And one thing, I'm in legal staffing most of my career. I am an attorney by trade, but a lot of folks in my industry has done well. It's the same thing, 20% do 80% of the revenue or whatever the numbers are.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
it tend to be dynamic personalities that are good with people, because it's a staffing and we live on the negotiation spread.
Right.
So they're very, very similar. So a lot of my former colleagues and counterparts are now doing real estate, and they're doing quite well. But like for me, I'm a lawyer. So, being credentialed has helped me in my job. But I know people who are very successful that never even finished college. Real estate is the same thing. You have, lots of realtors, and you have a funny part about this in the book, where at least when you were young, you had to go spend some time taking a course. Now you
Yeah.
can just probably do it all online from your computer. You never have to go anywhere. So,
Right.
so realtors, you have all different kinds of levels of education and whatever. How important has your credentials been to your success? And what do you think when you hire new realtors? What kind of credentials are you looking for?
I feel like my credentials, my resume has been very helpful, because I'd like to say that I'm overqualified to do this for a living. The barrier to entry in this industry is very low. I rail against it all the time. In South Carolina, you have to be 18, you have to have a GED, and you have to have a reasonably clean record. Reasonably clean. And, reasonably clean, I guess that's subjective. And that's why I call this an industry. It's not a profession. You're a member of a profession. You have a law degree. You're a lawyer. This is not a profession. So if you can bring a professional attitude and standards to the business, then you are delivering an extra layer of service that the average Joe isn't going to get from the average realtor. So, yeah, I think that, and having a background, going to UVA, being part of that community, I would say the two things that I took from UVA, whether I knew it or not at the time, consciously, because gosh, how conscious can I really be all the time between the ages of 18 and 22? I mean, I was so wet behind the ears. It was pathetic. But two things that were instilled in me, two, whatever, at UVA were being able to write and express myself in a pithy way. I was an English major, which was a huge mistake, but if they offered a minor there, I was basically a history minor. And I kept taking courses in history that this one professor, who has since passed away, but his name was Stephen Innes. And it just was incredibly good training, in that you could not write a paper that was more than 2 pages long, but you had to have, it would have big double spaced and typed. You could not be redundant. There was no room for BS. It also couldn't be shorter than 2 pages. So the point is, you had to make your point, support it, and get out without any flowery language or just a lot of BS. And that's incredibly good training for anything that you do in life where you're representing somebody else and you're trying to get a point across in a pithy and direct but effective manner. The other thing that just becomes instilled in you at UVA is the honor code. I think other universities, I can't imagine not having it. It became so second nature so quickly. And my company's motto is, our unofficial motto is, do the right thing, even when no one is looking. And that's really the essence of the honor code. And I wish more people in more walks of life had that kind of honor code. And as you and I both know, it's sorely lacking, particularly in politics. Just do the right thing. You know, if somebody is telling you an untruth, you can figure it out pretty quickly because they can't remember the untruth they told in the details. But if you stick to the truth, if you stick to doing the right thing, it's impossible to forget.
Yeah. Well, look, I'm excited to get back to the UVA days. I do want to
Yes.
talk a little bit more about real estate. The Supreme Court opinion that, and I may get this a little bit wrong, but you'll be able to explain it to us. It might make the buyers responsible for paying buyer's commission. Now, I'm told,
Okay.
I'm told without really understanding that could change the industry some. It doesn't occur to me how that's going to happen. Well, I guess now in a transaction, the seller pays both buyer and seller's commission, but I guess this is going to change things. Do you worry about that? And how do you think it could change the industry? And that described it.
I don't worry about it at all.
Yeah.
I embrace the change. Okay.
Mhm.
And there was a settlement that Anywhere and Remax reached on this lawsuit, class action lawsuit. And then I don't think it's gone to an appellate level yet, but it's going to, because there were a couple of companies that did not settle, Berkshire Hathaway Home Services and Keller Williams among them. They're fighting it, and then they got this huge verdict against them, and they're appealing it. But the essence of it, as I understand it, and I'm not a lawyer, I just live with one. The essence of it is that these sellers, who were all homeowners of roughly homes, as I understand it, between like 250 and 350, were never explicitly informed that they did not have to offer any compensation to buyer agents. And for a lot of sellers, it was eye-opening to discover that after the fact. And it sticks in a lot of sellers' craw, like, why do I have to compensate Jane Doe, the buyer's agent, when Jane Doe is adverse to my interests? She's trying to get a lower price out of me. I'm trying to get the highest. Why do I have to compensate somebody who doesn't represent me? And it's a good question. And the fact is that business as usual is over. It's what I call business as unusual now. Mm-hmm. We have to explicitly inform our sellers that there is no requirement. There is no requirement, whether you're on our MLS or not, to offer any buyer agent compensation. Now, depending upon your price point, a fully informed seller might decide that it's in their best interest to offer some sort of compensation. But I'm not going to recommend, imply, suggest any amount, nor am I going to say, this is expected, this is usual, this is customary. It is strictly up to the seller. Part of the seller's decision-making process, where they're making a fully informed decision, is looking at what their competitors are offering, if anything, to buyer agents. Does that mean that buyer agency will go away? No, I don't think so, because people need to have their own representation. The problem is that because for a long, long time, buyer agents primarily looked to the transaction, meaning the seller would pay for their compensation, a lot of buyer agents got on social media and misled buyers into thinking that their services were free. Nothing's free. It's the buyer giving the money to the seller, who then pays the buyer agent. So you could say it's some sort of a shell game, but the fact is our industry is changing. And I would say that agents and brokerages who are resistant to change and want to shoot the messenger are not going to have longevity. The fact is, people do need buyer agents, and they have to be willing to compensate their buyer agent in many situations directly when they're looking at a house where the seller's like, I'm not going to do that. I'm paying my agent to represent me. It's all about transparency and making a fully informed decision. But, since the middle of the summer, I've had sellers saying to me, well, what do you think I should do? What I think they should do? is make a fully informed decision. I will not suggest, imply, recommend. I won't use any of the old language. I can't. I can't.
Yeah.
And we can't as an industry. Sellers and buyers need to be making a fully informed decision. There is no such thing as a free lunch. But if a buyer agent can't quantify their value, qualify their value to a buyer agent, they're not going to have longevity.
Yeah. Well, you know, one thing, and you said real estate is an industry, not a profession. But one wonderful thing about real estate industry is women have always had incredible success in real estate. As long as I've been around, it seems like the success of women is almost greater there than almost any other industry in terms of, you know, making a lot of money. Women do incredibly well in real estate. Why do you think that is? And do you think the opportunities in real estate are the same for women as they are for men?
Well, I think women do well in real estate because they tend to be better listeners. I'm going to put my head in some sort of a the wrong frame. Men and women can do equally well in this business, but women have done well because they're good listeners. They can be intuitive. They have that advantage, I think. But what's interesting to me is, particularly in the last 10 years, you have many, many more men going into residential real estate than, you know, if you look at commercial real estate, that's really a parallel universe, and it skews heavily male, heavily 9 to 5, no working on weekends. It's a different world, and not sharing a whole lot of information. But you see a lot of men, particularly in the last 10 years, moving into real estate, and not just retired guys looking for something to do other than play golf. You see a lot of well-educated, dynamic businessmen moving into the residential real estate world. And almost half of my agents are men, because it involves advocacy, problem solving, and negotiation. And you can also make a really good living if you do a good job at it. So yeah, for a long time, it was a lot of divorced women who were gravitated toward it because it was the one thing that you could do where you call your own shots, you have your own schedule. And if you work harder and smarter than others, you can make a really good living at it. And I think that when that secret got out and property values started to climb, that's when you saw a lot of men getting into the business too. Those who treat it like a business do well. Dabblers don't.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned retirement, and me and you we're very young, so retirement is not something we spend a lot of time thinking about. But in my case, you know, it would be hard for me just to stop doing what I do, because I like the relationships I have with my clients. And you know, when things are going really well, when you have a clientele that's established, and even if I don't want to be that ambitious with it, I can do pretty well with established clients and referrals. So is that the easiest thing to walk away from that? And I can imagine, as a realtor, it might be similar in that, you know, you have these relationships with folks. You probably enjoy some of the things you just said about realtors coming in retirement age. It's a puzzle. It's fun. It's also wins and losses. It's all the
Right.
things that can give us a little bit of juice. Is this the kind of job that you can do in retirement, and you'd want to do past retirement
Oh,
age?
yes, because
Yeah.
I know several people, contemporaries of mine, who have been trying to retire. They talk about retiring for years, and then the phone rings, and it's somebody that you did a deal with 6 years ago, and it was a great transaction, and you really enjoyed working with each other, and you can't say no to that. You can't say no to that. It's a hard, I've only known a couple of people who said, I'm dropping the mic and I'm out. And literally one day they were in it and the next day they weren't. I think it's something that I'll eventually, very eventually, phase out of. But as long as I'm having fun, as long as I enjoy my work and I feel like I'm actually contributing to my clients' well-being in that transaction, why would I stop? I'm having too much fun.
Yeah. So when I first practiced law, I worked for a guy named Dan Crafson, terrific lawyer. And Dan's probably 71 now. Still looks great. And he's still doing trial work. And so we had lunch.
That's grueling. Trial work is grueling.
And so 4 or 5 months ago, we were having lunch, and I'm like, Dan, are there any things that you can do better now as a lawyer? And what can't you do now that you could do when I worked for you? And he thought about it for a while, and he says, I could do everything. I could still think on my feet. I can still, respond objections. I can do everything, but I just don't have quite the energy level that I used to have. So maybe, putting in the long nights, getting prepared is much tougher for me now. But everything else, I'm probably better. As a real estate agent, are there any aspects? I imagine you probably can get better and better. But is there some things that you're challenged with? Like, for example, maybe the young realtors are better with technology. They can do some things, or how would you answer
young
that?
realtors are better with technology, and I am really kind of a dinosaur in that regard, but that's why I have a young assistant.
Right.
He set all this up for me today.
Mhm.
I know what I know, but just as importantly, I know what I don't know. And the stuff that I don't know and I'm not willing to learn, I pay somebody to do that for me.
Yeah.
And I'd say the hardest thing in this business is not buyers, not sellers. It's not running a business. It's unprepared, unschooled, and sometimes unethical agents on the other side of the deal. The most difficult aspect of this industry is I've never suffered fools gladly. But it's hard for me to suffer fools at all today. I have very little patience for that.
Yeah. Well, let's move on a little bit and get some of your predictions on the market. And I know you don't have a crystal ball, but a lot of buyers have been holding on to their real estate because they're no one wants to sell when you have these extra low interest rates that went
Yeah,
down
there are a
over
lot
time.
of sellers that would rather stay in a house that they've outgrown than let go of their 2.9% interest rate. And I get that. I get that.
Right.
But we're always going to have birth, death, marriage, divorce, job change. We're always going to have life that keeps the market going. And in terms of my predictions for 24, if somebody's out there giving you predictions, run away, okay? Because they don't know what they're talking about. We all just hope for the best. We all just hope for the best. And yes, interest rates hit 8% at one point this year. When I moved to Greenville, South Carolina in 1989, I was expecting a parade because we had secured a 30-year mortgage for 9.5%. And I thought, well, when is the parade? And so people lose sight of the fact that we had some really artificially low interest rates. And now we're seeing the other side of that coin of when you have those artificially low interest rates, it has a dampening effect on inventory because people don't want to let go of that. It slows the market down in terms of inventory. But interest rates are not static. They're fluid. Houses are more static. So I know it sounds trite, but I always say you want to marry the house and date the interest rate. You can always refinance later. But this is an election year and a presidential election year. And what I have found, if past is prologue, what I have found is that the market is pretty robust during that election year because both sides want it to be, okay? Particularly the incumbent. But what I also find is that during those couple of months leading up to that early November election date, September and October can get pretty quiet when normally we have a brisk fall market. September and October can get pretty quiet because the wrong person might win. Whoever that might be, the wrong person might win. I can remember it got very quiet in the market here in September, October, the year that Obama was first elected. And I guess there were a lot of people in this area who thought that the wrong person won. But I'm telling you, I sold 9 houses in the 2 weeks after that election because there was no uncertainty anymore. We were moving forward, and there was all this pent up demand because of, what if the wrong person wins, or what if the other person wins? We got through the election. The sky didn't fall in. He inherited a terrible market, which came to roost in 2009. But the world went on, and it became an unprecedented buyer's market. So the only thing that is constant about this market is change. And if you have somebody who's seen a lot of different markets, then you've got a lot of experience and expertise, and most importantly, perspective on your side. That is not to say you don't want to work with a new agent. If a new agent is being trained by somebody with a lot of experience and expertise, then they've got tremendous backing.
Yeah. Are there things you enjoy about this market? Obviously, if you get a listing, it's going to sell because of historically low inventory. But like, for example, in COVID, everything was flying off the shelf so fast. Maybe it was a little bit too crazy. Are there things that you kind of like about this market?
Yes, it slowed down a bit. It became more normal. There was a lot of buyer's remorse when you are during that frenzied market of 20 and 21, and for the first part of 22, when you, at least in this area, when you're one of 10 offers on a property and you win, but then the contract says that the seller doesn't necessarily have to do everything that you want in terms of what are repairs and what are not repairs, suddenly the bloom is off the rose. And you're like, but wait a second, I won. I'm offering more than anybody else, so I should get everything that I want. Contract doesn't necessarily work that way. I wish I had a dime for every time as a listing agent I've had to say to a buyer agent, where does it say in the contract that your buyer has to be happy? Well, I don't care what the contract says. I just want my buyer to be happy. Okay, where does it say that? The contract is our guide. The contract is our constitution. If it's not in the four corners of the contract, it's unconstitutional, so to speak. And so there was a lot of buyer's remorse during that very frenzied market, where if somebody was the winning bidder and then we're told no about something, they were not happy. They were not happy. And a lot of people overpaid. My job as a buyer's agent is to make sure that you, my client, don't unknowingly overpay. If you want to knowingly overpay, that is your business. But I'm going to make sure that you've got my opinion and that I think that you're up in the stratosphere. And what if you have to sell in 2 years? Yeah. What indeed? You might be on the other side of the coin and you might be losing money because, nobody has a crystal ball for what's going to happen in 2 years. So yeah, as great as that market was for many sellers, it was nerve-wracking as a buyer agent because you're trying to take emotion out of the equation, and your buyer is nothing but emotional because they've already lost out on 3 houses, and therefore they want to get the next one, come what may. That was a real challenge. I don't miss that market. I don't miss that market at all.
How about other aspects of the market? Like, for example, I live here in Loudoun County, just moved from Arlington. In Loudoun
beautiful
County,
area.
Yeah, it's nice. It's all really nice. We're lucky, but you don't. They're only building townhouses out here now. So let's say if you want to buy a new house, it's very tough to find a new house because the builders would rather get a row of those 8 little.
They're going for density. They're
going for density. They can sell like 800,000 times 8.
Right.
They're making
the
more
dirt itself is so expensive. They're going for density.
They're going for density. So what about the other aspects of the market? Are they affecting you in South Carolina as well? That same type of.
There's nothing more local than real estate. So it drives me bonkers on those. I don't really watch them anymore, but those morning TV shows of, they're sitting around on a couch and they have some national real estate expert talking about there is no such thing as national real estate. You've got different markets even within your local market. There's nothing more local than real estate. So yeah, it sounds like there's just incredible growth going on in Loudoun County. And yes, we've got growth going on here in Greenville, but it's not that everybody's just building townhouses. You're still seeing a lot of single family home spec developments and custom builds.
Yeah. Well, look, Jonah, your views on real estate are fascinating. And I do occasionally have panels of realtors. I'd love to have you on with some of your colleagues across in this area.
Oh, I am always happy to share my unsolicited opinions.
Yeah, exactly. And your book, you have a lot of unsolicited. I guess it's solicited because I did ask your assistant for the book, but it's a great read and you have a lot of opinions. But I did want to go back to your UVA days because I found you were there at a fascinating time. I got there during the Reagan years. I got there in the fall of '84. UVA was a conservative place.
Mm-hmm.
You came to UVA in the mid to late 70s, 77.
77. And then I graduated in 81. Yeah. And George Bush, the vice president at the time, was the speaker at our graduation in 81 because his son Marvin was one of my classmates.
Oh, sorry. Oh, okay. Well,
I mean, I don't know Marvin from Adam's House Cat, nor does he know me. It's not like we're buds, but it was a fairly conservative place then too.
Yeah, but I do want to hear about the Carter years. You were there during the disco years, which is, I just can't imagine a UVA during disco years. So, when in your book, when you went to Greenville, South Carolina,
I took a disco course.
Is that right?
I did.
Oh, wow.
I did. Did they have mini courses when you were there? You know how
they did, but not disco.
Okay. Well, when I was there in 1970, it was the winter of 78, and I took a disco mini course. I really did. And the instructor was actually a med student. And I did it so well that the next mini course, he asked me to be his co-instructor, which was a lot of fun. So yeah, I took and taught disco dancing in late 70s, early 80s. I need to add that to my resume because that is so damn impressive.
You were a disco duck, but there is a part of your book when you come to Greenville, South Carolina, and you're treated like a total Yankee. So when you came to Charlottesville, did UVA seem Southern to you coming from Northern Illinois?
Oh, very, very much so. Mm-hmm. Keep in mind that, I'm the 11th out of 12 kids. I was the only one among my siblings who did not go to a Catholic university. They went to Notre Dame, they went to Georgetown, they went to Santa Clara, they went to Newton College, which was then later absorbed by Boston College. Mm-hmm. I didn't even know that I was allowed to apply to a non-Catholic school. I went and visited UVA when I was a senior in college because my sister Patsy was in law school there. And when I came home, I said and it was, I went during President's Day weekend. So it was like February of 1977. And it's one of those freak weekends where it was like 75 degrees and sunny. And I was not a deep draft at the time, Julian. I was very shallow. Okay. I was like 75 and sunny in February. I want to go to this school and it's a good school. I want to go here. And when I came home, and we also looked at Georgetown that trip, and I also looked at the College of William and Mary. And I remember my only question during the tour at the College of William and Mary was, what are your vacations? Because it just seemed like stifling boredom there, just stifling boredom. But when I went home, my dad asked me how my trip was. And I said, well, I wish I could apply to UVA. And he said, well, why can't you? And I said, well, it's not Catholic, because my mom did not want me to go to a non-Catholic school. And I said, it's not Catholic. He said, well, I know that. And I said, so I can go there? And it was a real deal in terms of tuition at the time. My tuition check was less than $1,600 per semester. And I was an out-of-state student. And that was less than a lot of private Catholic universities. And I remember my father's extremely eloquent words at the time. He said, I don't give a good goddamn where you go, as long as you get a good education and you finish in 4 years. And so I applied, and the rest is history. I also met my husband, who's from South Carolina. He was there as a Jefferson scholar.
Hmm.
And I met him, William, on the third day of our first year.
Really?
Yeah. And we've been together ever since. Actually, he dumped me for a time
Mm.
over Christmas break, our fourth year, which he denies to this day. But we got married in 1982. We graduated in 81. And we've essentially been together ever since. And we have such great, lifelong, dear friends from UVA that, I mean, just 2 Septembers ago, we traveled through Ireland with 6 other friends from UVA. And we are as close now as we ever were. You forge some great relationships there and just a great outlook on life. You really do. I loved those 4 years. I really did.
Have you done some deals with UVA, fellow UVA grads?
I have here in Greenville, but not necessarily. It was one of those things that that you kind of find out by accident. You know, I have really good friends where he is a Duke alum.
Oh,
And so of course we rib each other a little bit, but he thought he was paying me a high compliment. And he said, "You're one of the few people that I know who are a Wahoo, and you don't bring it up in the first 3 minutes of conversation." And I said, "Well, you're one of the many Duke alums that I know that have to bring it up somehow in the first 5 minutes." So anyway, yeah, it's, you know, it's part of part of my background. It's part of what makes me who I am today. But you know, I don't walk around singing the good old song all the time. It's just part of the fabric of life for me,
Yeah.
for my husband and me.
Yeah. Well, so women had only been undergraduates at UVA for 6 years when you started, 6 or 7 years. I forgot what
That's
the
right.
first year. And
1970, it went co-ed.
did you feel anything different? Because by the time I got there, I wouldn't have noticed that. That wouldn't have been something that occurred to me. The women had only been there for 12 or 13 years when I got there. But how about you? Did you feel that kind of
I
dynamic?
didn't, because the life for women at UVA was very robust by the time. I mean, there was sorority rush. I was in the resident advisor program. I was an RA my third year,
Mhm.
and I was a program director within the resident advisor system my fourth year, and I got one of those free apartments in one of the old dorms.
Yeah, it's cool.
And the dean who ran the resident advisor system was a woman, and I forget her name now, but because I remember one of the questions that she asked me when I was interviewing to become a program director within because then you'd have RAs that reported to you. It was like getting up into management. And one of the questions she asked me when I was interviewing was, "Can you cook?" Which I thought was a really odd question, particularly to ask. And plus, by the way, I cannot, because those who can cook do. And I kind of looked at her that she would ask me that question. She said, "Well, we have a Sunday dinner every Sunday. We're the program directors, and it's potluck. So I like to ask everybody." I like to ask everybody whether they can cook. And my answer was, "I can read." And she appreciated that. So, yeah, I never felt like they were trying hard to give women a foothold. It was very much of an even keel by the time I arrived in 1977.
Yeah. Well, when I got there in the fall of '84, African Americans had only been there for 13 or 14 years, even though there were some in graduate schools for years. UVA was a very segregated place to me.
Oh, very much.
And I came from Northern Virginia, which we felt was progressive. It was military, government workers. So many of my friends in high school were white. Didn't think much about it. But UVA, I thought about it every day. All my friends were black.
It was very, very segregated in that
Yeah.
regard.
Was that an
Yeah.
adjustment for you, or were you used to that from Illinois? Was it the same, or was it an adjustment
Well,
for you?
okay. Well, so I went to a very small all-girls Catholic high school in Lake Forest, Illinois. I mean, I was a graduating class of 69 girls. Okay. But there was one other girl in my class who went to UVA, and her name was Julie Gibson, and she was African American. And what was really interesting to me is Julie and I might run into one another, into each other, you know, if we were on the same bus or something like that, or just walking down the street. But it was like we were on different planets, because the sorority and fraternity system was probably the most segregated aspect. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, and I don't think it's
Yeah.
changed all that much. Yeah.
No, I don't. And it's,
Mhm.
I think that's a missed opportunity. I really do.
Mhm.
But you know, they say that the most segregated hour of the week in the US is at 11 o'clock on Sunday morning.
Malcolm X.
Um,
Yep.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. And so yes, I would agree. There was it felt like a quota system, not just, I mean, I was out of state, and it seemed like everybody out of state was from Long Island, New Jersey, or a smattering of us other people, and I was part of that smattering. Julie was the only other person I knew from Illinois.
Mm. Right. Were you able to build relationships at UVA with Black students? So in my case, I do have a couple of really close friends. One of them I played basketball with, a white guy. We're still friends today. And in law school, I made quite a few. I went to UVA Law as well. But were you able to have close relationships with African Americans at UVA?
You know, the closest relationship I had with it was a guy named Mike Mallory,
I
who
know
was,
Mike D.
you
Mallory.
know,
Yeah, of
well, he
course.
was a senior RA
Yeah,
when I was an RA.
he's a
And
great.
then,
We used to play tennis together. He's a great guy.
yeah. And then when I became a program director, he was also a program director. So the university did a really good job in that the resident advisor system was very diverse in terms of male, female, and also racially diverse. And if I had not been an RA, I would never have known Mike. But of
Yeah.
course, Mike has never met a stranger.
He's an amazing guy. He's done so much for so many people.
Where is he working now?
He works for the Ron Brown Scholarship Program. I'm surprised Mike is slipping on the job. Extremely successful person like you should be donating to his nonprofit. But he was a dean for many, many years. I think about 15 years
Was he
ago.
really at the university?
Yeah, he joined Ron Brown. I think the Ron Brown program about 15 years ago, I think.
Uh-huh. That's
He used to
terrific.
work in Roslyn in Arlington.
Uh-huh.
He worked there part time, and I'd see him. I think we got together. He's coming on. We have not connected yet because I've been dying to talk to him as well.
He needs to
But
come on the podcast.
yeah, he's such a great guy.
Mhm.
But also I want to talk another famous African American. It was Ralph Sampson.
Yes,
Started
he
playing
and
at UVA.
we were
You remember those?
classmates technically. I can remember, I
Yeah.
mean, who could not miss Ralph Sampson because he was so tall. He was like 7'2", wasn't he? And
Yeah.
they had to have a
7'4".
custom cot. He was 7'4".
You're 7'4". Yeah.
Yeah, he had to have a custom cot
Mhm.
made for him in his dorm room. Everybody knew who Ralph Sampson was. And you know, one of the funny things about going to, and it was a very Southern school from my perspective.
Mhm.
One of the things I had to get used to, but you were from Northern Virginia, so it was probably second nature to you. But when you would be walking to class, like walking towards the lawn, and you might be the only person on one of the walkways, and there'd be some person coming the other way, and the person could be male, female, black, white, whatever. When you passed each other, they go, "Hey." And the first time that happened, I was like, what? And there is a social currency, a relaxed social, I guess you'd call it a lubricant there, that I had never encountered in the Chicago area. I would never have presumed to say hello. And then it just became like second nature, and it was great. So,
Yeah.
but I mean, let's be clear. It was still a bastion for Southern white conservatism.
Yeah.
I never let that stop me. Clearly never let it stop you. But what I liked about Virginia, what I valued about Virginia, is that it never told me or tried to tell me what to think. It challenged us to think for ourselves.
Yeah. Well, I want to get back to UVA and those issues in a second. But there's another custom in America. African Americans, whenever we pass other African American in the street, we always speak, unless we're in an area where it's all African Americans. But it's very rude for us not to speak to another African American. you know, when we passed them. So when I was in Holland with my son, and you know, I'd pass an African American and I'd speak, and they'd look at me like, "Why are you talking to me?" It's not a custom in
Oh, it's not
Holland.
a
So
custom in Holland.
it's not
Yeah.
a custom there. So I remember one of my friends that I met over there. He's a white guy.
Mhm.
That custom bothered him to no end. Why would you speak to a black person but not speak to a white? That just bothered him. And I just said, well, it's long.
Yeah.
We don't
Yeah.
want to get on it. But anyway, I also want to talk to you about football games. Now, UVA football
Oh God.
was
Okay.
terrible for
At
yeah.
that time, we sang the good old song for first downs.
Yeah. They
That
still
was
kind of
not,
do. They still
that was not the golden years at all.
well, they still kind of
We had
sing that.
basketball. We had basketball to be proud of. And I can remember it was really snarky, but like when we were playing, I'd never seen the orange horde before I went to UVA. I wasn't even aware of Clemson. And here, you know, in South Carolina, Clemson is this powerhouse. I'd never seen Clemson orange, never heard of the Clemson Tigers or anything like that. And they were just killing us in the first game that I watched there. And the student section started a very snarky chant, which was SATs, SATs.
Oh, yeah.
And I thought, okay, I've got a snarky streak, but that was super snarky. But the thing is, I don't think that they could really get away with it today. Not that much of a difference.
The first game I ever went to, Clemson beat us 55-0. That was when they had Refrigerator Perry. And,
yes. But that was Georgia. He was playing for Georgia.
Yeah. Well, so but during that game, Clemson brought this huge crowd, and we were laughing at their band because, you know, we had a pep band. So when Clemson's band came on at halftime, the students were being snarky and they were saying high school band. So when our team came back for the second half, they were killing us. The Clemson crowd yelled high school team. And so they definitely got the best of us. But look, I did want to say, did it occur to you that, you know, our football team was terrible? Now it's so important for Southern schools to have good sports, good football. That's important for kids that are applying for school. Did it ever occur to you that the level of sports teams matters? So that did being trounced?
That was not even on my radar. I mean, I was this nice Catholic girl from what I welcomed about UVA was the opportunity to compete with boys on an academic level again. I hadn't done that since eighth grade. And what bothered me about hanging out with the Catholic boys from the local Catholic high school was because I didn't go to school with them. It took a little bit longer to figure out who the stupid ones were. And you always figure that out the hard way. Yeah. And I don't recall having I didn't perceive much value on their part for a quick wit or a quick mind. I was known as quite the smart ass in high school, and most boys didn't like that. Whereas my husband and I gravitated toward each other because I do give him a hard time because I am a smart ass.
What is the future for young realtors today? Are you optimistic that people can go into real estate and do well?
Yes, I'm bullish on entrepreneurial agents who go into the business as a business. Okay. If you're looking to be fed, you know, when people call me up and say, what have you got in terms of lead gen, like lead generation? I am not the source for you. I'm looking for people who are going into the business to treat it like a business, and they behave as entrepreneurs who are cultivating their own business and treating their buyers and sellers as the clients that they are, and not having a transactional approach. These are all about long-term relationships that I have with my agents and that my agents and our company have with our clients. It's never a one-off. It's never a one-off.
Well, they'd be lucky to work for you. Joan, this has been great. Thanks for so much time.
Julian, thank you so much. I've really enjoyed this, and I'd love to join a panel if you put one together.
Yeah, I definitely will. That'll be soon. But I really enjoyed hearing your story. You're an incredible person. People should buy your book. It's a lot of fun to read. So let's keep in touch, and we'll do this again.
We will. Thank you so much, Julian. I appreciate it.
You're welcome, Joan.
So much.
Yeah, okay. And you too. And have a great weekend.
Take care. You too.
You too.